Hey everybody, this is Kevin, and welcome to part 3 in my little series here on space cards. Uh, I hate to wrap it up, but this is the third and final in this particular series. No doubt I'll have more space cards in the future, plenty more other things to share with you, but this is the end of this particular series with the tins. So we've made it through Mercury and Gemini, and now we've made it to the final Apollo program. As you know, everyone's probably aware, Apollo is the NASA program that got man to the moon. And again, without the efforts and successes of the Mercury and the Gemini missions, we would never have made it. So hats off to NASA for doing it the right way in the steps that they took. And it all came to fruition when we landed Apollo 11 on the moon and subsequent flights. And man, it's just amazing. And here we are in the 21st century, and we're going back to the moon with the SLS program. I am so excited. Artemis 2 is going to be going, hopefully in the next, I would love to see it happen in the next 12 months, but I'm guessing between 12 and 18 months we're going to get there, but we're going to send astronauts on the Artemis capsule to the moon and back, not landing yet. That's set for Artemis 3, but we are going to send human beings around the moon, which we have not done since 1972. Can you believe it? I mean, a lot of people that may be watching this weren't even born yet. So just amazing. We live in great and wonderful times. So with that little long introduction, let's go ahead and get into the Apollo tin. I'll show off the images on this box here. There's the mission patches. Of course, probably the two most famous are that one right there, Apollo 13, and the one on the far right here, Apollo 11. Very, very cool. So there are some absolute gems in this box. I'll show you what that's all about here in a bit, but let's go ahead and read some history on the Apollo program. So here's the mighty Saturn V rocket lifting off. The power. Oh, I cannot imagine having had the thrill to stand there within proximity and watch that thing lift off in person. That had to have been just the moment of a lifetime. So anyway, here we go. Card number 1. The Apollo program was the successful conclusion to the goal set by President John F. Kennedy on May 25th, 1961, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth within the decade. Can you imagine that? What a prominent statement. Between October 68 and July 75, NASA launched 15 manned Apollo flights. 11 were part of the lunar landing program. Amazing. Just absolutely fantastic. So there we have the intro to how it started with President Kennedy's famous speech. All right, number 2. Boosted into space by a powerful Saturn rocket, the 34-foot Apollo Command and Service Module, the CSM, held 3 astronauts. The spidery-looking Lunar Module, or LEM, was used to land 2 men on the moon and return them to the CSM. Prior to re-entry, the Service Module was jettisoned. Only the Command Module completed the journey. So it's even too small to see in this picture here, but all of that whole thing, just a little tippy pyramid shaped top on that is what came back to Earth. Oh, here's a better picture of what I'm trying to describe, actually. Do you see the white pyramid? That is the only portion that returned. That was the Command Module. Then you had the Service Module, the silvery cylinder, down below. And then the Lunar Module was housed in this little compartment right there. So, but that little Command Module is the only thing that brought the astronauts back home safely. All right, card number 3. Before men actually landed on the moon, 4 manned Apollo missions tested performance of both the CSM and LEM. While Apollo 8 flew 10 orbits around the moon on December 24th, 1968, the 3 crewmen took turns reading aloud from the biblical book of Genesis. Their words were broadcast live worldwide. Guys, if you have never heard that You need to just look it up on YouTube, Apollo 8 Genesis, and you will hear the astronauts reading from the book of Genesis as they orbited the moon. And to see the Earth come into the picture as it rose above the lunar surface, and they're talking about how God created the heavens and the earth, it will give you chills. In fact, I'm getting chills just telling you the story. You know, and I know I've preached on this channel and I've done some Bible studies, but I just want to let you know that as much as science tries to disprove the Bible, I can't tell you how many accounts I've read where, especially the Apollo astronauts, the ones that went around the moon and then came back around and saw the Earth floating in space, how that actually brought them closer to God. And they recognized, amongst all their scientific studies and education, they recognized that a creation needs a creator. And they saw it firsthand from outer space. And that is just, oh, what a testament right there. It's a beautiful image of that. Might be Aldrin standing on the moon. I'm not sure. We'll see here if it even says. Okay. As millions on Earth anxiously watched Apollo 11. Oh, let me read this again. As millions on Earth anxiously watched, Apollo 11 made the first manned lunar landing on July 20th, 1969. While Michael Collins orbited the moon in the Command Service Module, Neil Armstrong and Edwin E., aka Buzz Aldrin Jr., touched down in the LEM. As Armstrong stepped out, he said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Can't quite make out the name tag, but I can't remember who took the picture and who it is in the image. But anyway, it's either Armstrong or Aldrin in that photo. Let me angle this down just a little bit. Sorry, a little hiccup there if you saw a little jump in the screen there. Okay, moving on to the final card. We have the mighty Saturn V. Look at that thing of beauty. That is just, oh. If you ever get a chance to visit any of the space centers in our country, Johnson Space Center in Houston, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and even the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, each of those three have a Saturn V on display, an actual, full-scale, the real deal Saturn V. They were rockets that were built, but due to budget cuts, NASA never was able to launch them to the moon. But they were built, and they are still on display. So you get a chance to see an actual Saturn V at any of those three locations. So after Apollo 11, NASA made 5 more manned lunar landings over the next 3.5 years. Each flight explored a different landing site. Astronauts performed dozens of scientific experiments, took thousands of photographs, and brought back over 800 pounds of lunar samples to study. Mission accomplished. And that pretty much sums up everything I have to say about the early programs in NASA. Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, mission accomplished. Amen and amen. So that wraps up the card series, the metal cards from the tin box. And now we're going to get into what's in the box. I think you're going to find these pretty interesting. They're different. I will say this. I think they're better than last week's, but they're completely different, and you'll see what I mean. I want to cover them up for the time being, just to make it a little more dramatic. Slide them back here, and we're going to bring the first one up, guys. Check this out. These are actual cards that you could get from Topps. I forget the year. We'll look at it here in a second. But these were sold by Topps, and they came in cards. So imagine pulling this out of a pack of cards. Unreal. From Topps Heritage Heroes of Spaceflight, guys. This is an authentic space-flown Space Shuttle Orbiter Payload Bay liner. That piece of payload bay liner flew on the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Check that out. Now, it doesn't specifically say that that flew on Atlantis. They're just saying that that's Atlantis. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll read the back and learn more. But that piece of payload bay liner is authentic and has flown in space. Oh, it is from Atlantis, sure enough. So I was right the first time. You have received an authentic space-flown relic from the TOPS American Heritage Collection. On the front of this card is an authentic piece of Space Shuttle Orbiter payload bay liner from Space Shuttle Atlantis. The relic on this card is certified as to having been flown in space on an official NASA mission. TOPS pledges to bring you closer to American history and its greatest heroes. So they're actually calling the Space Shuttle Atlantis a hero. and just not to be too nitpicky, but I just want to point this out. What you're looking at here is the Space Shuttle. It's the STS, the Shuttle Transport System. Now, the little thing on top that looks like an airplane, that's Atlantis, but that is technically called the orbiter. That is not a shuttle. This whole thing is the shuttle. But just that portion of it, the Atlantis, is actually the orbiter. But this is appropriate where it says Space Shuttle Atlantis because it does show the full stack all combined. But anyway, just kind of interesting little tidbit of trivia there. But that is an authentic space flown piece. That's exciting to have in my collection. Okay, so that's Atlantis. Well, check this out, guys. Space Shuttle Orbiter Payload Bay Liner from Columbia. The very first space shuttle, and unfortunately, the shuttle that we lost most recently. I mean, it's been 21 years now, I think, since we lost Columbia. But it was the very first shuttle in the fleet. And there she is. Same verbiage on the back, but this one says from the Space Shuttle Columbia. So that is a true relic that has flown in space. So, very special part of my collection. Next up is Discovery. Space Shuttle Orbiter Payload Bay Liner from Discovery. So you'll notice they all have that kind of a gold tint to it, but a little different pattern on each one. But that is Discovery. Now, Discovery's pretty cool because I've seen Discovery in person. Well, I saw Columbia lift off in person. That was pretty cool. But I got to visit the Udvar-Hazy Air and Space Museum, part of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and Discovery is on display there, and you can walk right up to it. Can't touch it, but you can walk right up next to it. So I was able to see Discovery up close and personal. But yeah, so there's Discovery. And there it says right there, Space Shuttle Discovery. All right, next up, Space Shuttle Endeavour. Now this is a little bit different. This is Space Shuttle Orbiter Payload Bay Thermal Blanket. It's not the liner, it's the thermal blanket. So, yeah, I'm trying to get see if I can get the light to glisten on to get a little texture to it, but it's just a blank piece of white paneling there. But it's thermal blanket to keep temperatures within reason. Alrighty. And last one, guys. So that literally covers all of them minus Challenger. Obviously, they weren't able to get one from Challenger. What year were these cards made, by the way? 2009. Yeah, 2009. So, but, and here we go. The final card. This is very unique. This is a piece of wiring, copper wiring that was flown on Space Lab. So, couldn't tell you what piece of the spacecraft it came from, but I would wager to bet that very, very important information was transmitted through that copper wire right there. Couldn't tell you specifically what, but sure enough, This is a piece of wiring from Space Lab. So, and you wonder how much of this stuff was just thrown away and junked after, you know, it was brought back and deemed worthless. But for collectors, I mean, look what they were able to do with this piece of wire. They were able to make an elegant collector's piece out of this thing, and bring joy to people like myself that collect space relics and things. And so yeah, that's a very cool little piece right there. It's different, you know. There's no autographs in here. There's no astronauts per se, but there are space, we'll call them individuals because they were individual spacecraft. So very cool collection. In my eyes, priceless. I mean, just I wouldn't put a monetary value on these sorts of things. So, but guys, with that, it's kind of been a long video, but I wanted to highlight some of my nicer collection pieces. I'm thrilled to have shared them with you, and just kind of, and for me to go back and see them again, because, you know, how often do we go back and go through our collections? Probably not as often as we'd like to. So by making videos, it gives me an excuse to go back through my collection and rehash the memories of when I first got it, when I first laid eyes on it, when I first held it. All those memories come back to you when you go back through your collection. So I encourage you to dig out your old boxes and blow the dust off and go through and see what you got. I guarantee you'll find some things that you've forgotten that you even had. So it's kind of fun to rediscover those things once again. So with that, guys, I'm going to call this video a wrap. And we are now done with the trilogy of the Space TIN, T-I-N, collection of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo mission boxes. So with that, guys, I'm going to call it a video. Thanks again for watching. God bless. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.